Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to House of Footy. It's your boy Ray, and with me, I got a full house. Welcome, Mac
Good evening.
and Gio.
What is good, guys?
Today, we'll be reviewing the final 9 episodes of the hit docuseries show Welcome to Wrexham. But before we get into it, don't forget to follow us on our social medias, both on Twitter and Instagram. Our handle is at house_of_footy. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We are on both Spotify and YouTube. And lastly, feel free to get in touch with us via email. We love hearing from you guys, and we want you guys getting involved. Our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. And now the goods, Mac.
So let's take it away. So again, we're going through the final 9 episodes of the docuseries Welcome to Wrexham. Again, just want to be able to preface going into the series. I had seen the full thing. We have the two, I guess now no longer versions because you guys have completed the series. I think that's how it's gone now. But like I said, in terms of the final 9 episodes, in terms of what we're going to cover, it's really from the 2022 January transfer window up until the end of the season. And just a quick recap of kind of what happened, some cold notes, some highlights to be able to go over. Wrexham, prior to where we had kind of kicked off, they were in a position where they're considering firing their coach, Phil Parkinson, potentially bringing on somebody else to be able to manage the team. However, they went in a strong run of form and end up renewing confidence in Ryan and Rob, who had bought the team, of course, to further invest and sign a striker named Ollie Palmer. That was kind of the big final twist of one of the episodes. I think it was episode 10, the first episode that we kind of started off on for the second half. Going throughout the course of the season, the team ended up making it to the final of the FA Trophy, which is kind of the lower league version of the FA Cup, but actually lost 1-0 at the final when they played at Wembley. As the season starts to come to a close, they finish off very, very strong, but just fall short and finish out of the automatic qualification spot. As in the National League, there was only one automatic qualification spot. So they are kind of shoved to the playoffs, make it to the semifinals because they kind of got seeded there based off their season performance, but unfortunately lost that game of the season. And at the end of the docuseries that played, a lot is left up in the air in terms of, okay, now we need to rebuild. We love the project. We'll see what happens next season, which we will get into and hope what we see in the next season of the show, because we already know what happens next season, because that's the season that just happened, of course. So with that being said, let's get into my fellow co-hosts' initial takes. Ray, I want to be able to start off with you. Now that you've seen the full docuseries, what is your initial reaction to how things have wrapped up in terms of how the final 9 episodes went through your viewing experience?
Yeah, I didn't mind it. I liked it overall. And you mentioned in Mac last podcast that it was a little bit slow and it would pick up. Definitely did. I think as the season went on, it made sense sort of how they transitioned from sort of just getting to know the background of the team and sort of what they were going through. And now I think they were diving more deeply into the players' backstories as well, including that now that obviously the audience is aware of some of their backgrounds. I think they did a good job meshing that with some of like the some of the fans as well. And overall, it was a pleasant watch. I wouldn't say it was difficult to watch. It was a pretty standard documentary. I think something that for sports, it's sometimes I guess hard to wrap up, but I think encapsulated all the elements and emotions that all the fans and players were going through, and had a nice little end to it. I think it ended by one of the ladies being interviewed at the end saying that she would be starting to watch football for the first time next season, which is just the season that just passed. So yeah, nice little wrap up for this season. So I liked it. I didn't mind it at all.
What about you, Gio? Kind of what is your initial reaction to the final 9 episodes?
Yeah, no, I think it kind of, I hate to be sort of we are a football podcast, but we kind of hate to be Rotten Tomatoes as well. But I thought it was exactly how kind of the season went. It was a perfect depiction of that. Series kind of starts off a little slow. You kind of learn about what the club is about, things of that nature, and then it picks up. It picks up in the second half of the season, which in football terms, they picked it up in the second half of the season as well. It got more interesting, obviously, transfers, things of that nature, more about the players, and how the club and the players really came together to really kind of put in a good effort and prove that that they are just a little bit too good for the National League and kind of deserve to be up there in League One and Two.
Absolutely, I definitely see where both of your points are coming on. Where you feel it crescendoing towards I'll say the middle late stages, like episode 12, 13, 14 for me is really where it picked up. And then as the season started to die down, you can kind of feel it within the last two episodes because we already know what happens, right? But with that being said, there was, and Ray mentioned earlier, there was a lot of kind of side stories, again, between individual fans, some players, even Ollie Palmer, as I mentioned earlier, kind of the big name that they really brought in. Funny enough, he was just a League One. I think, if I remember correctly, he was a League One striker playing for Wimbledon. So it's not like he came off even the championship level, right? So, but for them, it was a huge signing, and £600,000. That sounds like a weekly wage in the Saudi Arabia League right now. But that was a huge transfer at that moment. So I want to be able to ask both of you, was there an individual, like a side story or character that they maybe took a deeper look into, or you went back around and really enjoyed learning more of the depth of maybe that situation? Gio, what about you? Let's start with you.
Yeah, obviously, we talk about the wages of Ollie Palmer. The transfer fee of Ollie Palmer really puts into perspective of, Nation League can buy a player for that much, but a guy in the Prem could be making that weekly, or a guy in Liga and can be making that weekly. So it kind of really puts into perspective, the levels of football and how much these guys are really making. But I really love, obviously, NBA players these days are coming out about it, even, as recent as Dele Alli speaking about, what weighs on them, obviously. And for Jordan Davies, he had a lot of problems going on at home with his girlfriend his girlfriend and the baby and things of that nature. And again, it just shows the human side of sports, and that's what I really love about this, is that they are human. They do go through very human things, very humane things that normal people do go through, and to that, and to go through that and then still be able to go out there and perform at a level that Jordan Davies has that season, and being able to score those almost game breaker like goals for Wrexham to kind of get them out of tough situations. He's been really kind of like the bright spot of the team, apart from Ollie Palmer coming in the second half after the transfer window.
Absolutely. I want to touch on that as well, because it definitely felt, I don't want to say it was shoehorned in, but of course it's an important story. It brought a lot of eyeballs to it, brought a lot of attention, which helps a lot, because there's a lot of different kind of charities they were able to bring up in terms of helps finding support and just let know other people's story. But it fell in, this is just in the middle of the documentary, in the middle of a season, he's still doing his 9 to 5 job and still has to perform. And a lot of people may not know that, right? So it puts you in a perspective where, like, on the TV, they just seem like characters to us, but they actually are kind of people going through things, and they still have to live their life and do their job in a lot of ways, right? So that, for me, I do agree with Joe, was very important side story that was taken upon, and I think they shed a lot of light, and I enjoyed learning and listening a lot about it. What about you, Ray? Was there, I guess, do you want to speak on that, or even is there a different kind of character or story or aspect of the football club you enjoyed learning more about in the final 9 episodes?
Yeah, I guess a little bit about the Jordan Davis situation. Of course, they did a great job touching on sort of that human aspect. At the end of the day, these guys are all humans. We all go through the same things on a daily basis, so definitely any problems that they have will definitely not get highlighted in the media, but things can be going different back home, which sort of ties into my sort of side story, which is similar, but and I guess you guys will understand it as I describe more. For sure, Christian Dibble, the backup keeper, as we learned, Leighton, the first, the main keeper, got injured, and then he was the backup keeper. And then it goes sort of diving into sort of a bit about him. He had like a bad couple games the season before, and it was kind of hard for him to gain confidence. And a position that we don't touch on too much, I guess, is of course the keeper's position. And now that there was an injury, he had to step up, and really gives you that perspective as football fans. And we all, have had our share of time playing outfield, but some of us more than others in keeper. You really have to feel for keepers and that confidence, right? Typically, keepers can't really win you a game unless you're Allison getting a last minute header, but definitely can play a big part for you to stay in the game. And so, and that same effect, any mistakes that they make, they're gonna be amplified, right? And of course, the game that I'm sort of pointing out is the game against last place team Dover. They were winning 2-0, and then he comes out. There's like a cross. He comes out and punches his own player, and then it's a crazy game. It goes to like 5-5, and they ended up winning 6-5 at the end with a Jordan Davis goal. But after everyone's celebrating at the end in the pub, and then you can see fans still continue to blame Dibble for how the team was doing. So that sort of perspective really brought it home to see obviously how different positions on the field approached games and how they're viewed by the media. So that was interesting for me.
Absolutely. I thought that was and to see him even turn it around and kind of through the semifinal, the FA Trophy and the final, him playing very, very well. It was nice to see that was re-inputted back in. Maybe not, and kind of forced you to like, hey, yeah, they had this moment, but there are other moments he did stand out because there is a lot of kind of a magnifying glass under goalkeepers that make mistakes, right? So it was good to see that aspect of it and how it turned around in the documentary. Both of you went a little bit more serious for your favorite moment, side story. I'll be honest with me, you may already know where this is going, but it was episode 12, the first like the cut right before even the intro, where Humphrey Kerr, kind of the Englishman, that Liverpool fan that brought Rob McElhenney kind of the love of football, the pain of football, doing the Star Wars Obi-Wan Kenobi TV show, kind of it was like an audition tape where he's just walking, and then they cut in like the pew pew with the Star Wars music in the background. I was like, that's my guy. That's he may not like it, but that's my guy. That's my scene. I was here for it. I absolutely loved it. And then immediately cuts to the intro. I'm like, no, we need to play that back again. Why are we doing this? So of course, going into rewatching the documentary a second time, I was very excited just for that intro. Because funny enough, the first time I watched it initially, I didn't know they did that whole cutaway because I was just like, I'll just go forward, watching it because it's just the Humphrey Kerr guy. He's not famous. I don't care. But no, watching it back the second time, I was like, yes, absolutely, it was beautiful. So for me, that was definitely my favorite moment. And even later on, I was listening to a podcast and he was talking about, because other people were asking him about that. It's like, that was a funny moment that they enjoyed. He's like, yes, all I was trying to do was be a fat alien and it didn't work out so well because I didn't get the job. So, he still gets to be a chairman of Wrexham. So, give and take there. But with that being said, in terms of the final 9 episodes, Gio, for you, was there maybe an individual moment that you were surprised at that maybe they shared, or a moment on the pitch that stood out to you? What surprised you?
Just I feel like obviously the Ollie Palmer signing, I think, not surprised me, but opened my eyes in terms of the difference one player can actually make, and when you look at bigger picture teams and they want to sign big names and things like that, when you actually go out and look for a player that addresses your needs, how much of a difference that truly makes. And I guess a lot of clubs kind of stray away from that. They still have to make, there's still things like revenue they have to kind of account for and things of that nature, to drive sales and things like that. And they want to sign big names, but let's just go back to signing players that we need. They don't have to be a really big name. They just have to be a player that, that works for the club and works hard for the club and wants to play for the club. And I think those are kind of the basics that, bigger football has kind of strayed away from. And it's just surprising that, smaller clubs are actually more, have to be way more fundamental. And I think this is a good entry point for like, although in the last review I was saying how they could go more in depth, this is the entry level stuff that non-football fans should start off on and really grasp how fundamentally sound these lower wage and lower level football clubs have to operate at in order to stay afloat, and the talent that they kind of limited in acquiring, but when the right player is signed, look how big of a difference it can truly make.
Yeah, His impact was huge because you can see he's very much the stereotypical English big man, small man type of strike partnership between him and Paul Mullen. Ollie Palmer, I think he's like 6'5", huge man. In the National League, them playing long throwing with, I think it's Tozer, with the center half coming in. That is as English as you can get. So lovely to see his impact and kind of what he was able to bring to the club. Same question to you though, Ray. Is there a particular moment that kind of surprised you, or kind of that happened in the documentary that you want to be able to continue to kind of discuss?
So pretty much Gio summed it up. That was going to be sort of my more surprising, most surprising thing that happened. His transfer was a record fee for the club, and I'm pretty sure that I haven't looked it up, but I'm pretty sure that's going to be one of the top record fees in the National League. And yeah, like you said, Max, some of those players, some of the Premier League players are earning this amount every week, and so surprising that that was just the transfer fee that was paid for one player, and it was a club record fee. Something that's definitely not surprising is the fact that even in and I guess a little bit of shade to this, but of course the long throw in, it's always going to be an effective threat if you don't have, I guess, the quality. Hey, just put it in there, give it to the big guy, and some chaos will happen. But I guess the last thing that really surprised me was, hey, we're watching that game. I think it was Grimsby, the last game, I guess, in the playoffs, where Grimsby went through beating Wrexham. The player John George McAtee, he was the number 10. He had like 2 goals and like an assist or something like that. Ridiculous. He is actually a striker for now Premier League side Luton Town. He was
No
so he
way.
signed from he was a Grimsby player, signed for Luton last season, and then spent another season at Grimsby. But hey, will we see him in the Premier League maybe coming up? Because I don't know about you guys, I felt he was a standout player. I think, of course, the documentary was kind of focused more on Wrexham players, but I'm like, every time this guy's touching the ball, something's happening. He sets up the cross, he scores a goal, the banger, by the way.
Yes.
And so, hey, he's 23 years old, turning 24 this month, and we'll see. Maybe we'll see him in the Premier League. But that was the most surprising thing for me.
Absolutely lovely. For that, it'll be interesting to see how much of a crossover it is and how much this eventually could feed into our everyday Premier League coverage, because their plan is to, of course, bring this club to the Premier League. That's something that they definitely highlighted. So who knows, 4 years from now, if we're still doing this podcast, knock on wood, we may be picking Wrexham to be an underdog of the season. Who knows? Probably not. But, it is what it is. I'm going to let you know right now, if they get promoted, that's going to be one of my teams that I'm going to vote to be relegated, probably. Just general thoughts there. Gio, sorry, you want to be able to jump in here?
Hopefully one day, down the road when we're still doing this podcast, that we see Wrexham versus Luton Town, and me and Ray both take the under on it. And
But over
cash
in
out there.
yellows. But
Over in yellows,
But
over in
over in
yellows
yellows.
for sure.
You parlay
Yeah.
that, right? Is that the word?
Parlay.
For sure.
Okay, I
Parlay.
just want to make sure. I'm not.
but-
You guys are the masters at this. I apologize.
But yeah, I'm waiting for that day.
But
One
we
day
don't
it
bet.
will happen. Oh, but no, but we don't bet. We don't bet.
We
Of
don't
course.
bet.
Sure. That's why you know what that is. Anyway, with that being said, we're just going to take a quick break here, and then we're going to be able to come back and continue to talk about the second half of the documentary series, Welcome to Wrexham. So please do stay with us. Welcome back to House of Footy and continuing our coverage of the docu-series of Welcome to Wrexham. Second half of the episodes, and now we're going to continue on with some of our thoughts. We're going to start off here a little bit negative, though. From the second half of specifically of the docu-series, or maybe an overarching thought of the whole thing, is there one individual critique or aspect you didn't like so much? Let's start with you, Gio. What are your thoughts on that?
The fans. I didn't like how they were so easily able to jump ship when things got rocky, but so easily to get right back onto the boat when things were settling in and beginning to settle in. Obviously, patience is key. They've been in, there is frustration. You've been in the National League for 14 odd years or whatever the number was. But, you're bringing a new coach in Phil Parkinson, who is known to get teams out of these troubled situations. And You bring in Super Paul Mullins, you bring in Ollie Palmer, Jordan Davies having a great season. I think these are all bright spots, and I think because they're so eager to get out, they kind of lose sight of how well this team was performing. Obviously, nearing the end, you know, they obviously get humbled after saying, "Oh yeah, we're gonna go on to win the league, this, that, and the fourth," and obviously fall short. Um, but yeah, I just didn't really enjoy that too much. If you're gonna stick with them, stick with your team through the ups and downs. Yes, there is frustration. I get that, but these guys are trying. It is new. New things do take time, and obviously now that we're living in the present, we know what happens. But yeah, I mean, like, trust in your team, trust in your guys, trust in obviously experience in Phil Parkinson. Like, even the conversation of the possibility of him getting sacked, did not enjoy that too much. So I would say the fandom of Wrexham, I think you guys all need to chill. It does get better. It does get better. It does get better.
As a Man U fan, you can put your stamp of approval on that. I completely understand. But Ray, same question to you. Is there, I guess, maybe an individual episode or aspect of the show, overarching or in the final 9 episodes that you didn't like so much?
So I'm gonna go back to one thing I mentioned earlier, and really ticked me off. Was, of course, end of the day, Rob and Ryan, whatever they say about the team, whatever, they want to go up, and they've been mentioning that since the first episode. The goal is promotion. Of course, it's an investment, and they want to do the best for the team so that they can get a return on that investment. But at the end, I think they lost to Grimsby, and then Rob McElhenney goes into the dressing room and goes, "Hey, you know what? It was never our goal. We just wanted to make town proud." I'm not buying that, man. I know you have to console your players at the end because they lost a game where you could have continued and got promotion. But don't say that. We know from day one you said promotion is the goal. Don't fall short and say, "Nah, we didn't want it. It was just we wanted to make the town proud." Yeah, of course you do, but hey, man, don't kid us with that. But yeah, apart from that, small thing. Some of the episodes I felt were kind of like fillers. Of course, there are important things about football that were mentioned. Of course, like the episode about hooligans, right? And hooliganism, the background of hooliganism in the sport. And there's, of course, the episode about Hollywood distraction and how they were doing. Like, I felt like some of that didn't have. Of course, it's part of the documentary, and for non-football fans, it would be a nice little add on to the football documentary. But I felt it wasn't really needed. And then I enjoyed the romance episode, the one where they were sort of explaining men's relationships with each other. But I felt like that's also something added, which could have done without. But for people who are not football fans, of course, it's a nice little break from just straight football highlights and what's happening with the team. So yeah, that's just my 2 little critiques that I've had.
No, I can see where you're coming from, especially with the first part, because even after the FA trophy final, I always just want to say FA Cup. It is what it is. But you see Rob Govrak and was like, "Hey, it ain't shit. This is not what we're here for. This is not what we're here for." Okay, okay. You wanted to win. I think it's like his way of consoling, but it's like if anyone else is watching it, you're like, that's fake. That's fake. It is what it is. He's an actor. It's okay. You gotta do what you gotta do, make money. But I do, at least personally, I disagree with you slightly about the other episode, like in terms of the bromance episode in some ways that they put it. I thought, I don't know, for me, maybe it kind of hit a spot with me in terms of how the world of football is built. It's definitely a side story, for sure. But I enjoy just like recollecting and thinking of how I got into football, kind of what kind of hit with me. So I can see why maybe that's something separate where they can do a deeper dive into that. But I feel like at a certain point, you can see the season wasn't, we all know the season was going to end poorly. So kind of giving back to the grassroots felt like a good natural fit. But to be honest, at the same time, it made me, the first time going through it, I couldn't watch the last episode because I was like already sad and I knew what happened, right? And then when I go back to watch it a second time, I'm like, okay, fine, I have to watch it because we're doing this, of course. But it just doesn't leave you with a great feeling in some ways, right? Because you're such at a high, you're getting more emotional about this, and now you know they lose. So I could see that's more of a negative in some ways, but it does connect more with the fandom in some ways for me. I guess individually for myself, maybe an aspect I didn't like was, and I guess it's a combination in some ways for both of you, is where they did go into the hooliganism a lot in that one individual episode, the episode 10, which I enjoyed learning more about that because we are definitely, as football fans, kind of distant from it. We're not part of that. We have less of that community sense coming as football fans living in North America, so we don't have an understanding of how stuff like that can happens continuously. But and sometimes, and the saying is like the sunlight is the greatest disinfectant. If people just put eyes on it, they understand it. But a lot of times when they're coming with excuses like, oh, people are riled up because of COVID. This is the first time be able to getting out, and now it's all pent up and built up, and people don't. It seemed like they're throwing a lot of cold water in some areas, and even though I would say like Rob and Ryan and some of the individual people they do interview do have a good point. Like the guy that they had who's like, oh, and he was having trouble with his girlfriend because of it. It's like, if I saw him down the street next weekend doing the exact same thing, would I have been surprised? Absolutely not. Because he's like, yeah, it sucks. It's unfortunate this happened. But it didn't seem like, from me, it was like, oh yeah, you know what? He doesn't realize how much he could potentially mess up his life if he keeps going about this. So for me, I didn't enjoy that aspect as much. As well as, like I said, the feeling going into the final episode where it was like a storming cloud emoji type of thing. But I guess to circle back around to, again, a little bit more positive aspects, and we'll kind of be able to go around the horn here to see our thoughts. For you, Gio, was there, I guess, from what we haven't already talked about, is there maybe an individual moment that stood out for you? Maybe that now looking back, even on the first half, that stands out to you more because you saw the second half, or from overall in the documentary that you want to kind of bring up and talk about a little bit more?
Not in particular, but I will just reiterate this. Phil Parkinson is my type of coach. Gotta love the enthusiasm, boys. We gotta love the enthusiasm. I think just adding comedy to it is obviously a nice touch. Obviously, you know how many jokes Ryan Reynolds tries to slip in, and I do like what the celebrity aspect kind of does to football. Because I think football is straying away. Well, it's getting a negative light because of the growth of the Saudi league and how Saudi's kind of just pulling players, picking and choosing players based on monetary value. But the Hollywood aspect of it coming in is that Hollywood writes great stories, and this could be another one where they could write a great story and kind of bring in fans again, and hopefully grow the game and then grow the game in the right way where there's funds going into early programs for kids who want to play football in whatever country it is, growing this game in the States, growing the game in North America in general, just so we can put players from North America out to Europe and be able to compete in those big clubs and in those big games. So that's always a nice thing that I found with this series.
Absolutely. And I love your love for Phil Parkinson. Definitely on brand for Gio here. He's definitely a disciple of the, if you know how there's always like the coaching tree in basketball where like, oh, he coached with Pop. It's like, he's definitely under the Jose Mourinho umbrella. And that's right in the middle for prime Gio, of what he likes to see in a coach. Ray, same question to you. Is there an individual aspect of the second half or overarching that you look back on the first half that really stands out to you?
So there was for sure a moment, and I think this was episode 16, Hello Wembley. I was watching it. Of course, then they are in the FA Cup trophy final. They keep saying, such a big thing, we're going to Wembley to play in the final. Will Ferrell's there, Kit Harington's there, David Beckham, Jason Sudeikis, and like their wives are also there. So I'm like, why are they making such a big deal out of it? And then like as I'm watching it, I'm like, yeah, it's a cup game. They're still really not really promoted. So how big could it be? After the episode, though, I thought about it more. I'm like, you know what? I kind of understand why they made such a big deal out of it, because if you think about it, a lot of these players won't really get the opportunity to play in a cup final as professional players. And you know what? We had, I think, that opportunity. Mac was our coach for soccer when we were in high school. Gio, you and I, when I
Yep.
was in grade 11, you were in grade 12. We
Yep.
had that run ourselves. And looking back at it, and I was kind of thinking, you know what? I'm putting myself in their shoes, because yeah, it wasn't, it was still just like a school championship that we won, but that brought the group together. It was sort of um another win for them. And so yeah, for sure, make a big deal out of it, especially as a pro player, going into play at Wembley, I guess, because all the cup matches are being played there. That's why it's such a big deal. So taking a step back, I kind of understood why they were making a whole big thing, even though they didn't go on to win it. But yeah, even just our run in that year, I think that brought us together, brought good memories. And so yeah, that episode really stood out after reflecting on what that meant for the club.
No, I could see that. I do want to throw in there. You guys were a bunch of dickheads to coach, though, so I could see you in terms of where you're coming from on that end. But I think for me, it was, I guess, the individual standout moment. Again, I would argue my favorite episode. I think it's episode 12. It's when I listened to a podcast where Humphrey Kerr, the gentleman I brought up earlier about the Star Wars thing, I'll bring up over and over again. He did an interview and talked about how Ryan Reynolds, prior to that moment throughout the documentary, was more of just in it as a philanthropic thing, where help the community, this is an investment, this is what he does, he likes building brands, this is something that he can kind of attach himself to and help build and grow, and he loves that aspect of it. But he did not really care about the football side as much, or if at all. But you can visually seeing someone catching the verbal bug of being a football fan, of being a fan of a team, and going through the highs and lows in that moment when in the 12th episode it was the scores tied against Stockport, who are the rivals looking back at the table, where they were below them facing the semifinal of the FA Cup trophy. To then in the last cup in added time, Paul Mullen scores 2 goals, and you could see him celebrate and screaming, and then through the comedy moment, Rob being like, "Oh yeah, this dickhead wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for me," da da da, that type of thing. But at the same time, you could see it's like, okay, he finally gets it now, right? This is why people are crazy about it, being in that emotion, being in that sense of community. So for me, I had not visually seen someone catch the bug like that before, because we've come to football each individually as fans already. We were already there, so we're on the boat. We understand the game. But to someone to see that live happen, not live, but to see it actually happen, recorded, and be able to understand who they were before and who they were after that moment, it was lovely to see, and it kind of hit a spot for me. But with that being said, this is kind of the premise of the show has really been 2 North Americans, American and Canadian. Wrap up Ryan Reynolds, still Canadian, big up. The whole aspect of them coming to Wales, to the United Kingdom, to help build a team through kind of the football league, right? So I want to be able to ask the both of you, now that we've watched the full docu-series, and I'll start with you, Ray, is this replicable in North America? Is there maybe a different sport? Is it still football or soccer? How do you think something like this, and an aspect of it's maybe a docu-series, or if it's kind of like foreign ownership, kind of vaulting up a kind of a club or a team, that you think could happen here?
So I'm very glad you asked it that way, because I think it can be replicated with an MLS team, but the viewership won't be as high. Whereas, unless it's a really big club like your New York or LA teams. But what I would want to see this to happen, a similar scenario for this, is with an NBA team. Of course, the North American market, basketball is one of the biggest sports, and it has a hold of that market. And so myself just wanted to learn about, we've all follow what's his name, the equivalent of Fabrizio for the NBA,
Shams.
Woj, of course. We all follow these guys. I want to see how those decisions are made and of course the background of an NBA franchise. So I would definitely want to see that happen. A documentary series like this happen for maybe the whole season of, let's say, the Toronto Raptors or something like that. That would be pretty interesting, and I think that would bring a lot of views for a lot of people in North America, and also even people elsewhere in around the world that maybe want to get into basketball and maybe aren't like familiar with it, right? Because of course, whole thing about basketball as well, and the NBA over the years is they want to market it to a bigger and worldwide audience rather than just keeping it in North America. So I think that would be pretty cool.
No, I think that's a very interesting suggestion in terms of something that could happen. But same question to you, Gio. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that something like this, in one aspect or another, or one that you think is kind of replicable, do you think that could happen here?
Yeah, no, I don't think it can be football just because you've seen what the celebrity aspect has done for the MLS game, and arguably it's not much. It hasn't changed much. I think the grassroots just isn't strong enough for the passion to be there from the like the fandom isn't there like it is in Europe and in England or sorry, Great Britain, whatever you want to call it. But to say that, I think the equivalent here is arguably, obviously the NBA, obviously baseball, and obviously hockey. I think hockey's the biggest one. I think
Mm.
within Canada itself, hockey can have its equivalent story to this Wrexham team, where a smaller league side, can compete and be able to farm players that are homegrown one and be able to obviously attract you know a lot of attention and garner a lot of attention. We've seen it happen with a lot of young players. I don't know if anybody watches hockey out there who's listening. Connor Bedard, Connor McDavid, both huge superstars and all homegrown, and they have taken the hockey world by storm. So I think that's very possible, and I think if I had to argue, yeah, like I would firmly believe that the sport here to do it would have to be hockey.
That's fair because I find that as an interesting suggestion in terms of uh, because maybe I take a look at this question a little bit differently, in my opinion, because I think like culturally from the kind of the ground up, that makes a lot of sense. For me, I went
Mhm.
with a sport that personally I don't like in terms of situation, how they could be built up. And I think even Gio, you might know a lot more about it than I do. I don't know why I'm assuming that, but maybe. But I'm actually going to go with baseball because a couple different reasons. Let me break it down. Let's just give a thought process here. If we were to do any sport in North America to have a promotion relegation, I think baseball is an easy fit, an easy shoe-in because there is already so many levels of like the AAA, the AA, the single A. I think that's a thing, Gio, if I have this correct.
Yeah. Yep.
So teams can go up and down, and I think financially the other reason why it makes sense is because there is no salary cap versus a lot of other American sports. There is that kind of strain on it where you could see kind of the American pastime, the American game, theoretically come in, and a foreigner, let's say, let's use the example, a Saudi Mandeb who loves himself some baseball for whatever reason, comes in, buys a team, is able to throw money on, like, let's say if the situation there's a relegation, a AAA team because he likes the city of Montreal because the Montreal Expos are back or whatever, that type of thing. And he's able to build a community, lift it up through the club at some sense. Again, I don't like baseball personally, but I feel like there are fewer barriers of entry, and one way to then bring that sport, instead of it just being the American pastime, is there a way by doing a TV show like this to make it more of a global sport where it is a little bit more known out there? Because it's generally played, if I know correctly, by Americans and some South American countries, but that's pretty much it. So I think that could be an interesting example. Again, I wouldn't watch it, but I think that I could bring a lot of eyes and is the easiest sport to apply those rules, right? Because you could just throw money on it, right? Right? If I understand Gio.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think you can very much so draw similarities from a professional baseball player in single A or triple A, and someone who's
Mhm.
in the National League who they are making, if not arguably less than a minimum wage job but they are pursuing the dream of playing their sport. So I think the correlations can be drawn and drawn very well at that. So yeah. To that point, I think baseball makes a very good argument.
Yeah. Again, like I said, I would never watch it, but I think it could be interesting. Again, there has to be some rich something that has some sort of other standard. Like it's if Jim Ratcliffe's bid doesn't work through for the Manchester United, maybe he buys a baseball team. Who knows? Probably not. They'll probably buy cricket over there because that's their third sport. I think it is. I don't know.
So yeah.
But with that being said, to continue on, this kind of in terms of their season. As we know, they didn't make it, promoted, tear, sadness, stormy clouds. We know, fast forward into the future, what's happened in this most recent season, the 2022-23 season. Wrexham got promoted. They had a large race going down to the end. I think this was the first time in National League where two teams actually ended up finishing over 100 points. It was them and what was the other team? Do you guys remember off the tip of your tongue that they played? It was in that matchup. Anyway, point being, as we look this up live on the podcast, is there maybe an individual moment that you think from this past season or that has just occurred that in the next season of the TV show that you would want to see? Gio, would you be able to start us off there in terms of, is there something maybe an individual they bring on? I don't know if it's a spoiler for your answer, but you want to see next year or next season.
You already know my answer, and it's exactly what it is. It's how the Ben Foster signing transpired. Obviously, very known for his podcast, the Cycling GK. And he's able to bring a lot of guests on and talk about the game. Obviously, it's a good business move on his end, being able to grow himself through that stream of media. And being able to work with people in Hollywood, just not bad connections to make at all. So being able to go out there, obviously turn down Spurs, which was a fantastic career choice for him. And then to be able to win the game and get promoted, because we know what happened. We've seen the posts. He makes that penalty save, and obviously, they all go crazy and they earn promotion. But it'll be interesting to see season 2. Just if they go into more details about the things of that nature and just how it breaks down and the excitement of everybody, during the celebrations is definitely something to look forward to.
Absolutely. Just to kind of jump in there, because I want to kind of piggyback off what you're saying, is that it was the game against Notts County, because at that time when they faced Notts County, there was like 3 games left in the season. Wrexham had just overtaken in the league to kind of be in pole position to get the automatic qualification spot. And in that, I think it's like the third last game of the season. If Notts County were to lose that game, it seemed very unlikely they could potentially overtake Wrexham. But if they tied or ended up winning that game, Notts County did, they would be in a position where they still have a shot. They still have a chance to kind of re-overtake and get above Wrexham. But in that individual game, the score at that Wrexham ended up going down at first in the first half, came back to tie early in the second half, then taking a lead, then surrendering the lead, and then in about the 86th minute, something like that, towards I would say late 70s, early 80s minutes, they end up taking the lead once again, 3-2. And at a time, they give away a penalty. The top scorer of the league, if I remember correctly, ends up lining up to take the penalty. Ben Foster saves it miraculously, phenomenal save. And I think he said in an interview afterwards, he doesn't like celebrating penalty saves, but that's probably the first one that he's done, given the moment, given the hype. So I think more so that moment, I think, would be an excellent peek behind the curtain to see kind of the build up and the aftermath of the game. I think would be fascinating. But to continue on the question to you, Ray, from everything that we know that happens in the most recent season, is there something that you'd be looking forward to see in the next season of the documentary?
Of course, I do echo the same thought as you guys. I want to see Ben Foster, not just his experience, but his interactions as a former Premier League player playing in the National League. Does he bring anything in terms of a different sort of mentality into training, different elements that he could help the team? And on that same note, going to the next season, Wrexham, as we know, finished in the playoffs, wasn't promoted, but next season, which is the season that we that just passed, they should be favorites to go up, right? So it's going to be a switch in terms of how Phil Parkinson will, who is still the manager, by the way, of the club, will be able to motivate his team and change from sort of being underdogs in the pregame talks to, hey, we should be getting out of this league based on the squad that they have. So I'm interested to see that, and of course want to see how the involvement from both Ryan and Rob continues to be this season. Probably will be much more involved with sort of how I guess well recept I guess the way the documentary was well received. I'm sure that they're going to want to continue and build that brand for themselves and also the club. So those are some of the things I want to see next season.
I love where you're going with that, because I think in terms of them being their favorites, I wonder if they're going to be able to create like a storyline where they're the heroes and Notts County are the villain, or do they make it where they're both playing well? Because a lot of times going back in this season that just occurred, they would always talk about where, oh, the real story is Notts County. We've spent all this money. They're doing this is surprising. There should be 2 spots. It's ridiculous that they're not going to end up getting promoted. Spoiler, they do through the playoffs, so they end up getting their just desserts there. But the split between them, because there's by the end of the season, there's only a 4-point gap. Wrexham scored 116 goals. Notts County scored 117. Both Wrexham conceded 43. Notts County conceded 42 goals. So they're edge to edge, right in line with each other. It was just by like a razor's edge that they went over. And they had all that financial support, had all the backing of everybody, and almost any neutral were hoping that they would be able to go through for the story. And of course, Notts County wasn't. So I'll be very curious how they are able to build that in terms of story arc, where they're behind, they have to catch back up, they take the lead and the stress, and how they can still come out where they aren't the quote unquote villains, right? So I'm very intrigued to see how that's kind of split there. Before we wrap up and I guess give our final thoughts on the documentary as a docuseries as a whole, with that being said, that's what I would want to be able to do. Gio, would you be able to give me your final thoughts and your rating out of 10 for the docuseries as a whole?
My rating actually stays the same. It's at a solid 7. I think based on sheer content wise, season 2, I know for a fact will increase the score. But just based on the start of it and how slow it started, and based on how it ended, obviously cliffhanger. But at least they didn't, end it early and say, oh yeah, they went on to do this and that, that little blurb at the end. At least they didn't do that. They kept hopes high, but obviously showed the world that, they lost, they came short, they fell short of it all. So that, they kept it real there. I enjoyed that part, but still a 7.
Same question to you, Ray.
Yeah, I was, what? I'm feeling good today. I'm gonna give it an 8. I think it had a lot of, overall it was a good documentary, but also it had a lot of different points that they hit that would bring in a bigger audience. Of course, non-football fans will find it, I think, just as enjoyable as us football fans. So overall, I think whoever's watching it, whether you have a background in football, whether you like football at all or not, I think it had enough for everyone who's the average person watching. So because of that, and it was an easy watch, I would give it an 8.
I would be along the same lines, because I think in a previous podcast I gave the first 9 episodes a 6. The second 9.5 episodes, I'll probably give a 9, because I really enjoyed a lot of them. Like in episode 12, I thoroughly loved. And if you put Star Wars into anything, it's going to bump it up a little bit more for me. So I'm going to round up and be in line with you, Ray. And overall, I really enjoyed it. Gave it an 8. I definitely would recommend it to other people. Hence, I recommended it to the both of you. You're welcome. Overall, loved kind of the story that they've been able to tell. And like Gio, I want to share the sentiments there, is that I think there is a lot of potential that they kind of set very good groundwork in this season. And to see what they're able to kind of show, dive deep into next season, given that everyone's on the same page. We don't have to do another episode on hooliganism. We don't have to do another episode on certain aspects of football, because everyone that's watched the series, we're already on board. We understand that. What else can they kind of show us and get us interested in? So I'm very excited to see what they do there and the different stories they could tell.
Sure.
But that being said, Ray, do you want us to wrap us up here?
Yeah, exactly. This concludes our podcast for today. If you like what you heard, please like and subscribe to us on our social medias. That's at @house_of_footy. If you have any comments, suggestions, or general banter, get in touch with us via email as well, houseoffooty@hotmail.com. The next time you'll hear from us will be next Friday when we release our last evergreen podcast for the summer, as the Premier League season is just around the corner again, boys. So on that note, thank you, Mac.
Take it easy.
Thank you, Gio.
Super Pummelin.
See you guys soon.